My lake cabin wasn't just a piece of property. It was my sanctuary, carved out of a forgotten peninsula that most maps barely even marked. It took me years to find the perfect spot, secluded, surrounded by whispering pines, and with a stretch of calm water that shimmered gold under the sunset. I had bought it in cash 5 years ago and rebuilt the cabin from its crumbling foundations with my own hands, board by board, window by window. No neighbors, no noise, just silence, the water. And me, that's all I wanted. And for 5 blissful years, that's all I had. That all changed one Sunday afternoon. I was sitting on the dock with a beer in hand, watching ducks skim across the water, when I heard tires crunching on gravel. It was strange. My cabin wasn't visible from the main road, and the path to it was gated and unmarked. I figured it might be a lost traveler, so I went to greet them. Instead, I found 2 uniformed officers stepping out of a black and white cruiser, looking around like they expected trouble. One of them, a heavy-set guy with mirrored shades, called out, "Sir, we've had a complaint from the HOA. They said you're constructing without a permit." HOA, I laughed out loud, genuinely confused. "There's no HOA here," I told them. "This land isn't part of any development. It's private, and always has been." They didn't seem convinced. The younger officer flipped through his notepad. "We have reports that your property lies within the boundaries of the Maple Ridge Lakeside Association." Now that got my attention. Maple Ridge was a sprawling housing development on the other side of the lake, miles away. But recently, they'd built a new road that snaked dangerously close to my back forest. Still, this cabin, my land, was purchased long before the first Maple Ridge home even broke ground. I explained all that, showed them my deed, and politely asked them to leave. They didn't. Instead, they took pictures of my property, asked about recent deliveries, and said they'd be back. I should have seen it as a warning shot. Over the next 2 months, it became a pattern. The same or different officers, sometimes 2, sometimes 4, would roll up unannounced, citing vague complaints from the HOA, noise violations, unlicensed, construction, improper fencing. Once they even accused me of illegally installing a well pump. Each time I'd show them documents, permits, photos, even a certified boundary map proving I wasn't within HOA territory. But it didn't stop. The last straw came on a foggy Saturday morning. I had just returned from a supply run when I found 2 officers already on my land, walking around the cabin, opening my shed, even inspecting my generator. No knock, no announcement. I demanded an explanation, and they claimed they were responding to a trespassing report. That me, was allegedly squatting on HOA-controlled land. I knew then that this wasn't incompetence. It was a deliberate campaign to harass and intimidate me off my own property. I drove straight to the county assessor's office, where I requested every public document related to Maple Ridge's plat expansion, zoning updates, and code enforcement. Claims. What I found shocked me. Somewhere in the past year, Maple Ridge's board had filed a new boundary proposal with the county, but they'd quietly extended it to include my land without notifying me. And due to a clerical error or some backdoor politics, it had been provisionally accepted pending review. They were trying to swallow my land into their HOA without consent and use code enforcement and police pressure to force me into compliance. That evening, I contacted a real estate attorney I trusted. She was sharp, aggressive, and had a reputation for tearing HOAs apart in court. We gathered everything, the footage from my security cams, every police visit record, every piece of title documentation, and then we filed not only a civil suit against the HOA for harassment and attempted annexation, but also notified the county of fraud, demanding an immediate boundary correction. I wasn't going to let them bully me. I wasn't just fighting for peace. I was fighting for what was rightfully mine. The courtroom was packed. People from our lakeside town had taken an odd sort of interest in my case, not just because it involved the HOA, but because deep down everyone had their own bone to pick with that board. You could feel it in the tension that sat like fog above the spectators. Whispers buzzed through the benches, and when I walked in, briefcases in hand, even the judge looked curious. Maybe I didn't look like the kind of guy to go toe-to-toe with a well-funded HOA legal team. But I wasn't here to play fair. I was here to win. My lawyer, Penny Garza, had prepared a mountain of evidence. She wasn't flashy. She didn't grandstand, but she was relentless. And that's exactly the kind of person you need when you're up against an HOA with a reputation for bullying and burying people in legal intimidation. We had the cop call logs, we had the video footage, and most importantly, we had the deed to my cabin showing I was never under their jurisdiction. Their side opened the proceedings with the usual HOA bluster. Their lawyer, a smug man named Theodore, Keene claimed that my property was under their expanded authority thanks to a bylaw amendment they passed 3 years ago. They cited obscure provisions about adjacent environmental influence zones and lakefront beautification compliance. It sounded like something out of a dystopian novel. But Penny calmly walked the judge through every step. "Your Honor," she said, "the defendant's cabin lies over 600 feet outside the original HOA boundary. This so-called amendment was never lawfully communicated to non-member property owners and was not recorded with the county registrar. Furthermore, Mr. Weston has never paid dues, signed an agreement, or received any benefits of HOA membership. On the contrary, he's been harassed and had law enforcement called on him 5 separate times without cause." The judge nodded along, frowning. "And you're saying the HOA sent the police?" "Yes, Your Honor," Penny replied. "We have dispatch records, officer testimonies, and even video of Mr. Weston calmly fishing when officers interrupted him on HOA request." I could see the gears turning in the judge's head. Even the HOA board members, 3 of them had come to court, were starting to sweat. Their confident posture began to sag under the weight of public scrutiny. Keene tried to counter, claiming I was a nuisance to the community, violating the spirit of the Lakeside community's standards. They even pulled out photos of my BBQ smoker, claiming it was unsightly. But we had neighbors willing to testify that they enjoyed the smell of ribs on a Saturday. One even joked in court, "It's the only good thing coming from that side of the lake." What really turned the tide was when we revealed HOA emails that had been leaked by a former board member. In them, the president of the HOA, a woman named Lorraine Maddox, discussed using pressure tactics to get me to either sell or comply. One email read, "He thinks just because he isn't in our zone, he can't be brought to heel. The sheriff will visit enough times and he'll get tired." The courtroom gasped. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Garza, are these emails authenticated?" "We had them verified by a third-party IT forensic analyst. The headers are intact. They were sent from the HOA server." Silence. Keene looked, like someone had pulled the rug out from under his perfectly polished shoes. Lorraine Maddox, seated behind him, turned red, then pale. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Weston, do you wish to countersue?" I looked at Penny and she gave me a small nod. "Yes, Your Honor, I do. I'm seeking damages for harassment, false reporting, disruption of peaceful enjoyment of my private property, and the emotional toll of repeated police visits." The trial didn't end that day. It dragged on another week, with depositions, expert testimonies, and legal arguments. But the weight of evidence was squarely on my side. Even the local sheriff testified that he'd grown uncomfortable with the number of calls they'd received, especially after it became clear I wasn't violating any law. By the end of it, the judge ruled decisively in my favor. The Homeowners Association has acted beyond its lawful jurisdiction. It engaged in targeted harassment against Mr. Weston, misused local law enforcement resources, and attempted to forcibly impose authority where none was granted. I hereby award Mr. Weston $275,000 in damages and issue a permanent restraining order prohibiting the HOA from engaging in any contact or enforcement action regarding his property. I nearly fell out of my seat. Penny leaned over. That's a bigger win than we hoped. Reporters outside the courtroom were already waiting. HOA drama, especially one involving a private landowner beating the system, made for great local news. My face was on the front page the next morning beside the headline, "Lake Cabin Owner Defeats Overreaching HOA, Court Sides with Constitution." But the fallout for the HOA was just beginning. Within days, the board held an emergency meeting. Members were furious. They were questioning the misuse of funds on legal expenses and the decision to provoke me in the first place. Several resigned, including Lorraine Maddox, whose reputation was now irreparably damaged. A special audit was called. Turns out, Lorraine had been siphoning funds for beautification projects that just happened to improve the view from her own backyard. By the end of the month, the HOA was in shambles. Membership dropped. Lawsuits stacked up from other residents emboldened by my case. My neighbors, once wary of the guy with the cabin, started stopping by more often. Some even brought beer and lawn chairs. We laughed about the whole ordeal like old friends. That summer, I hosted a community BBQ on my dock. It was symbolic. Open invitation, no memberships, no bylaws, no approval needed. Just good people, good food, and freedom. Even the sheriff showed up for a burger and a fishing line, but the best part? The silence. No more cops pulling up. No more HOA letters tucked under my windshield. Just the sound of water lapping against the shore and birds in the trees. Later that year, I invested part of my settlement in improving the land, built a small dock extension, added solar panels, and even installed a tiny community library box. Right at the edge of the road, it said, "For all, no board approval needed." The case had become a local legend. I even got asked to speak at a regional property rights summit. Me, a guy who just wanted peace and quiet. But this battle wasn't just about me. It was about standing up to a system that too often operates unchecked. I proved you don't need a suit and millions in the bank to win. Just the truth, persistence, and a damn good lawyer. People still come up to me telling me they saw my case and decided to challenge their own HOA nonsense. I always smile and tell them the same thing. They may own the paperwork, but they don't own you. As for me, I kept the cabin, still go there every weekend. And every time I walk down that dirt path, I remember how close I came to losing the right to enjoy what was mine, just because someone decided they didn't like it. But now, thanks to that court victory, I'm not just the cabin guy anymore. I'm the guy who shut them down. And every peaceful sunrise I witness on that lake, it tastes like victory.